Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about a new build I came up with, which is the damage Tempest using a hammer. As you might know, with the latest expansion, every class can use every arm, every weapon from their respective specialization. So the Tempest got access to the hammer from the Catalyst, for example. Before I start, I want to clarify that everything is on test right now, so don't expect this class to be meta or anything else. This can work, of course, as I already tested, but still there will be more tests in the future for more classes and also for more weapon combination and so on. Let's get to the build now. We run Fire, Air and also Tempest, of course. We run Conjurer because an additional aura is kinda needed, because we run this trait right here, which I will explain later. Then here we have the Sunspot. Whenever we attune to fire and when we overload fire, we get a fire aura, so it's needed. The same for the previous trait. Then we run Power Overwhelming for some additional power, and also powered bonuses are doubled while attuned to fire, so 300 power is huge. Then we run Persisting Flames. Fire fields created by weapon skills last longer. Then on air we run Ferocious Wind, which is additional free ferocity. Then Raging Storm. Critical striking a foe grants fury, gain ferocity while under the effects of fury, so 180 ferocity, which is like 12% more damage from our critical hits. And then we run Fresh Air. Recharge air attunement on a critical hit, gain a ferocity boost when attuning to air. Very strong trait and basically what carries this build. Without this trait, this build wouldn't exist. On Tempest, we run Unstable Conduit. Overloads grant an aura based on your attunement. So you finish your overload and at the end you get the corresponding aura. In this case, Shocking Aura. So this aura is needed for this trait, Tempestuous Area. Granting an aura to an ally increases your outgoing damage for a period of time. So we get for 5 seconds up to 10 seconds, we get plus 7% damage whenever we get an aura or we give an aura to an ally. So it's very strong for a 7% damage boost. Then we run Transcendent Tempest. Time to obtain singularity is reduced upon successfully completing an overload, gain increased damage. So whenever we cast the overload, we get the aura from this. The aura gives us 7% more damage from the Tempestuous Area trait, and then Transcendent Tempest, an additional 7% damage because we just finished the overload. As for the gears, we run a mix of Marauder and Dragon, and I also put in some precise War vs World infusions to fill in the additional precision I was lacking. We run the hammer as a weapon. This build can also work with Scepter and Dagger offhand, but in this video I want to discuss the hammer because it's the newest one. So we run some precision, and also in the relic we run the Relic of Speed, which is one of the most, if not the best relic in the game for War vs World, because it gives us so much movement speed while we have swiftness, and basically we have permanent swiftness in blob fights from our parties and also from ourselves. We run the Superior Rune of Eagle, and also the sigils are Superior Sigil of Force and Frenzy, and you can get in your secondary weapon set another hammer, and you can cast and you can use Force and Bloodlust, so you can stack 25 stacks of Bloodlust for 250 power, and then when you are out of combat you can swap back to your main hammer with Force and Frenzy. Frenzy is really strong because it also reduces your time to attune the overload here. Like you are here in these seconds right here, you cast your overload, then you swap to fire, you see this time on the cooldown from the overloads. The Frenzy Sigil also will reduce this cooldown. For the utility skills, we run Arcane Brilliance to heal, because it also deals some damage. doesn't really matter. You can also run anything else if you prefer. Then we run lightning flash, which is very nice to catch up on our parties if we are behind, or to save ourselves from bad positions. Signet of fire gives us the additional precision we need, so we can have some vitality and survive, because we are full melee class mostly, and also the overload is channeled, so it means that you will be casting this overload if you don't have quickness for like 4 seconds, and you cannot dodge during these seconds, so you need to tank the best as you can. Mist form, it's a panic button to become invulnerable for 3 seconds and also break stun. And we have the conjure fire greatsword because the other skills are kinda shit. And also we have the skill 5 on the greatsword, which is very strong, and also the skill 3. I will cover it in a bit. So basically the goal of this build is to cast your overload from the F3, and once it's finished it will leave this field, which will be hitting the enemies for a lot of time, and then you have to swap to attunements. In example, I can swap to fire, and whenever I do a critical hit, thanks to the fresh air trait right here, the air attunement will recharge immediately, and then we will swap to air again and we will overload again. Overloading is your best skill in your arc DPS. Most of the time it will deal like 80% of your total damage, so overload must not be delayed in the air. So while you are in air, the important skills are the skill 2, which is a channeled skill, but still it's a big damage dealer over time to 3 targets, and is also ranged, 600 range, so you don't have to be full melee. It's very nice to clip down the downies. And also the skill 3, which is common to all the attunements. Every attunement has a skill 3, which makes this projectile float around you and hitting the enemies. You can have up to 4 projectiles active at the same time, and you see how much damage they deal. You just have to exist in the fight and dodge around and survive, and the projectiles will do damage for you. As I was just saying, the important skills on air are the skill 2 and the skill 3. Then once you do them, I recommend, like you overload, you start casting your skill 2 and also the skill 3. You swap to fire and you immediately press your skill 3, because the duration of this projectile will give you a boon, which is 10% additional damage to the enemies, which is very huge. Then on fire, every skill is kinda important. The skill 5 is kinda slow on cast and is full melee, but it deals a lot of damage in a single hit. If you hit this, the enemies will suffer a lot. The skill 4 is another ranged skill, like the skill 2 from the air. You press it, it's not a projectile, like the lava erupts from the ground, and you do the damage. Nice damage also. And then the skill 2 is this projectile right here, which is not the best because it is a projectile, but still it's a decent damage if you can hit it. So let's recap. For now we do F3, we start casting our 2 and skill 3, then we swap to fire, immediately you press 3. I recommend using your skill 5 and your skill 4, and then since you reset your overload air with your air attunement, actually with the fresh air trait right here, you should swap back to air, and then while you are in air you should cast overload again. And then after this I wouldn't go fire, because the good skills on fire will have cooldown. I would recommend going to earth and of course casting your projectile. Spam your skill 3 whenever you have it. And on earth we have the skill 5, which is a blast, melee blast, which applies immobilize for 3 seconds, which is huge. And then at this point you will have air again, because you landed some critical hits, and you will have your skill 2 again, and you can press it after you cast your overload, and then you go on fire again. Now I will do a full example. This is the full ideal rotation. We start skill 3, skill 2, we swap to fire, skill 5, skill 4, we swap immediately back to air, we have the overload, we overload again, and then we swap to earth, we cast the projectile again, skill 5 for the immobilize, we have the skill 4 which I didn't cover but it is a block and also gives barrier if you block an enemy, and if you block an enemy we also get an aura, so it's very important to get this aura for the Tempestus area if you don't have an aura ready. Also on the earth we have this attunement, this overload right here, which deals a decent amount of damage, and also we leave a field right here doing damage, same as the skill F3 overload, but this overload will hit 5 targets instead of 3, and also you will get immobilized at the end of the overload, and you will get stability on yourself, pulsing stability for all the duration of the overload. Actually only 3 stacks at the start, at the beginning, but still it's very strong. On the water we have 2 skills which are good, and also of course the projectile from the skill 3. We have the skill 4 which is a leap, which deals a decent amount of damage and also is a 600 range leap, which can save ourselves and also help us filling the gap if you are behind. And then on the skill 5 we have some damage around us, decent damage, but still it's very close to you must be very close to the enemies to hit them. Air attunement, we also have some super speed, but to do it you have to be in place. It has a small cast time, and in my opinion it's not really worth it unless you have anything left, because you just need to stop into the enemy Zerg to cast the super speed. Instead, the overload air, for example, is still channeled, but you can move during it. So you cast it, you press your projectile, skill 2, you immediately swap to fire, skill 5, skill 4, you can fill in if you want with the water, then you must have your overload air ready again, and you press it again, you fill in with your skill 2 from the air, from your skill 5 and skill 4 from the fire, skill 4 and 5 from the water, and earth you must press your skill 5, which is the best skill in the water. Also the skill 2 is not bad, but it is very slow. It's like a full melee hitting like cyclone on yourself. If you see you don't get a lot of alacrity from your party, you can also go like this, like you go overload, and then you go to fire, skill 5, skill 4, your skill 2 from the air is not ready yet, so you go earth, skill 5, swap to air, and then you have your skill 2, and then your overload air is ready again, and then you can go fire again, you have skill 4, skill 5, and you immediately go to overload air. Don't forget to cast your projectiles on the skill 3. I don't do this all the time, but be sure to do it. This build is kinda easy to play and to understand, because all you have to do is to survive and drop your damage. Basically you have endless damage, you have no downtime, like in example with the Berserker, like if you are not in Berserker mode you deal 0 damage, but with this build you always have your overload air ready, because you do only critical hits, and so your critical hits will recharge your air attunement. So the goal is to always have this air field hitting with the lightnings your enemies. You can just spam this, and even if you are not very good at using the other skills, just focus on your F3 overload. From the fiery greatsword we conjure it, and we also get the fire aura, and also if an ally picks it from this trait right here we get another fire aura, which will be proc the Tempestus area. So the auto attack is very strong, but it is a projectile, so I wouldn't recommend using it at all. When you drop your fiery greatsword, the most important skill is the skill 5, which is an AoE, dropping some meteors on the enemies in a small radius, and then the skill 3, which is a long evade for like 1 second, dealing also a lot of damage. The skill 4 was saying the skill 4 before the greatsword disappeared from my hands is a long range skill which hits only one enemy and also will remove chill and cripple from you and will leave a firewall behind, and it does a leap which deals a lot of damage but only on one enemy. Also keep in mind the skill 1 will pierce the enemies, but still it is a projectile, so I don't recommend using it. Most of the time you drop your greatsword, you use your skill 5, your skill 3, and you can also drop it mid-cast on the skill 3, so you do some damage and stop where you want, and then you cast again your F3. Keep in mind then also, during the fiery greatsword, every crit you do will still recharge your overload air. You can swap attunement, so if you are in air with the fire greatsword, swap to fire or to whatever, do some critical chance hits, and then you go back to air and you overload again. You can just keep your greatsword until your overload is ready again. As you probably figured out already, this build excels in melee. You can also run staff on this build if you see the situation is more ranged, or even scepter plus dagger in your offhand. It's up to you. Right now I cover the hammer, which I think is very strong for melee because it complements the F3, which is full melee. So you cast your F3, and while you wait for it, you cast your strong skills from the hammer, which are melee 2, and then you go back to your F3 and overload again and spam this on repeat. So let's get to this build, to this clip right here. We are about to engage the enemies. I already start my cast from the F3 because what I want is leaving a field on the enemies at the end of the cast. So you must precast this before the fight, before your Zerg clashes into the enemy Zerg. I drop on them, I leave this field, keeping the pulsing, the lightning hitting them. Then I swap to fire, I use my skill 3, while using also the skill 2 from the air, as you can see. Then the skill 5, which is the huge damage, I swap to air again, and I drop the fiery greatsword. I use my skill 5 on the enemy Zerg, the skill 3, and I have my F3 ready again. I get cancelled. I also go down. I use my vapor form from down it. My team revives me, and I'm up again. I can use my skill 2. I swap back to fire. The skill 4 from the fire is ranged, so I recommend using it while you are on fire, on range. So now with the critical hits, I reset my F3 again. I wait for the overload. I start casting it. Okay, I wasted it. I thought the enemies were coming, or maybe that we were going to them. Okay, I hit the Lord and I did a critical hit. You see, even if the enemy is not close, is not nearby, you can swap attunement, do a critical hit on NPCs or whatever, or even creeps, and then you swap back to air and you wait for the enemies to come or to engage on them with your F3. Let's see what happens. The enemy just veiled. They are coming. I start my F3. We decide to drop out. Okay, we are on the lower ground right here. Is not a very good position to be in. I have my F3 ready again. If I decide to swap, okay, use my skill 5, skill 2 while I wait for my F3. F3 again on the enemies. Okay, this was huge. Skill 5 from the earth for the mobilize. Skill 2 again, which has also low cooldown. The cool fact about the hammer is that the skills have very low cooldown, so you can really spam them in between the overloads. It really complements the overload with the hammer. It's very strong. Here, this is the second and last clip I want to cover. So we have the enemy Zerg in the Tower Lord room. So we are about to go up. Since the enemies are stacking, I decide to drop my Fire Greatsword so I can use my skill 5 and benefit from it a lot, and then I can go overload and whatever else. Let's see it. Okay, I skill 5 on the enemies. I cast the overload. You see, I don't go full melee with my overload. I wait for the cast to finish, and then I can walk inside the enemy blob, and you can leave the air field on them, the lightning field, and you can dodge back again, so you can be alive while your F3 is doing damage. I swap to fire, skill 4, skill 5 was wasted because I wasn't melee. I cast my F3 again. I am on the enemy blob, skill 5 to immobilize from the earth, then back to air, and skill 2, which is the damage skill from the air. Skill 3, of course, keep in mind, sometimes I forget to press my skill 3, but keep pressing them. Don't ever release your projectiles, just keep them spinning around you and do damage for you while you are just walking into the enemy zergs. F3 again, overload, overload, fire, skill 3, skill 4, skill 5, air again, skill 2 while I wait for the F3, F3 again, overload, overload, and the overload is done. I swap to air, to water, because I had nothing else left, and the fight is over at this point. This is all for today's videos. Let me know in the comments if you are curious to try out this build, and let me know also if you try it. Sorry for the voice, but I had a cold last week and I'm still recovering from it. I can talk now, even if my voice is lower than usual. And please consider subscribe to the channel, and I also want to thank every subscriber, because this is the first video after I reached 1k subscriber, 1000 subscriber, and I really want to thank you for appreciating my content and letting me know that you enjoy my videos. Thank you for watching, and see you on to the next video. Bye and have a good evening.